Well, welcome everybody to our first session of day two at the World Vape Show 2022 in Dubai. Our topics today, we'll be talking about disposables. And this is a huge growth market, both here in Dubai but around the world. But are disposables proving viable from a cost and environmental perspective? And that's what we're going to be talking today. My name is John Dunn. I'm Director General of the UK Vaping Industry Association, and I'll be moderating the session today. On my right, we have Atif Amin from My Vapery, who's one of the major retailers here in Dubai. We have Coco Lee, who is the marketing manager for Elf Bar, one of the largest disposable devices manufacturers in the world. And on my left, we have Omar Fadawi, there we go, from Extra Disposable Vapes, also here in Dubai. So I'm going to kick off the discussion. When we look at this topic, we've heard a lot over the last couple of days around youth access, around traceability of the product and quality. But one of the topics that we really haven't discussed is the environmental impact of disposables. And also too the cost in these products for the users. So one of the things I think that's really important about disposables is the fact that from what we're seeing is they're bringing in new users to the devices and new users into vaping that previously smoked, but found it difficult perhaps to use a larger, more complex device. So we're now seeing them starting to come into this market and then transitioning from a disposable perhaps onto one of these other devices. But I think because of the growth, that could be an issue for us going forward. So I'm going to kind of kick off with the panel today, and maybe Atif, from a retail perspective, how is disposables in this market moving? Is it a big growth area, and how does it compare to open tank systems?
Well, when we're looking at the disposable market, we'd say it's the majority of the market currently. But if we're going to look at the full bigger picture, okay, disposables are a great way, and it's very easy for a customer to use a disposable. So essentially, from a customer who's looking to quit smoking, it's a great to make that transition, like an easy process. And of course, it's a lot easier to use. But something that we need to bear in mind, and this is something that we are focusing on very importantly at My Vapery, is the long-term effects of disposables and the environmental impact. So as a gateway in order to quit smoking, it's a fantastic method. But in long term, ideally, if there were other options, which there are other options available, so essentially using it as a gateway to get off smoking is fantastic. Something that we're doing very big at My Vapery is we actually have a whole recycling system actually currently put in place, okay? We have part collaboration with British American Tobacco, WVS, where we actually have recycling bins in our stores, okay? Some is co-branded with WVS, and in some locations we have our own. So this is something that we're actually looking to tackle. So just to summarize, they are a fantastic way to get people off smoking cigarettes, but of course, we are very concerned about the environmental impact, and it's something that we as the vape community really need to address.
Well, that sounds very interesting. And are you finding that that customers are actually using these bins, or do you do something to try and encourage them maybe to use them?
100%. So if you get the opportunity to visit our stores, you'll see our stores are completely packed full of disposables. And then when I see this, then I know for immediately I'm looking at what impact that's going to have on the environment, because I'm seeing all these full bins in all these locations, and this is just the ones that from people who are environmental conscious that have actually taken that effort to bring them into our stores. Then I'm thinking about the people who haven't made that effort and about how much waste that's going to make as well also. So yes, we're definitely seeing our bins being used, but is everyone using it? Probably not.
Absolutely. And Coco, Elf Bar is probably one of the largest manufacturers and most popular disposable device worldwide. How are you as a manufacturer looking at this? Is it something that the company is looking at in the future?
Definitely. F4 is actually, as you said, is one of the biggest manufacturer in the world. Actually, F4 is really concerned about the environmental issues. So we're going to have a recycle plan in the UK in maybe begin from June to July. So we do care about the environmental issues. So F4 is going to have this marketing campaign from in UK and also in Russia, Malaysia. So it's actually a world plan. And also the recycle bins and recycle marketing is not the only ways we can do, but we can find a result from technical ways. So our research team and technical team are doing a lot of research and a lot of how can I say that they finding different ways to get to solve this problem, and so that's it.
No, that's very good. From your perspective, Omar, obviously you have a very big brand here. Is it something that you're looking at when you look to design your products? Are you taking the environment into consideration as well when you're designing those products?
When I designed the product, I designed it to be easy to use.
Okay.
Because our goal is to get smokers off a cigarette, that they open the cigarette and they light it up. Our goal is to open your vape and vape it right away. That's when I start. We started like 4 years from now. So far, disposable vape is going faster than the regular original vape. When you use the tank and the juice, it's more difficult for end user to quit cigarette and start on vaping. Disposable vape help him to quit the cigarette faster. The flavor and the variety of the nicotine help them to get the way he like it. That's what I believe, that disposable will help more smokers to quit smoking. Because regular vape is more costly, harder to use for a beginner. Later, after he tried disposable, he liked the vape, he get into it, he can have coils, build his own, then he can get into it more.
Absolutely. I think there is that purchasing journey a consumer takes.
Yes.
And I think their confidence builds.
Yep.
Because disposables really aren't a new thing to the market. They've been around for 10, 12 years.
Yes.
But I think it's only really in the last year or two that the disposables like we see now have really kind of come to the forefront.
Sure.
And I think that's a lot around the innovation that China is looking at is how do you make it simpler? How do you make the products easier to use? And I think that's a huge factor in this. But one of the other areas that we looked at is from a cost factor. I know you talked about that consumers find it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more costly maybe up front to use open tank systems.
100%.
But do you find, and I'm not familiar really with the pricing here, is there a huge difference in pricing between open systems and disposables if they're used regularly, for instance?
Yeah, for a beginner, for him to start and buy a starter kit and buy juice and he have to refill his coils, it will be a costly more as a beginner. As a disposable, the price is reasonable, same as a pack of cigarette. He already buying his pack of cigarette. He might spend one time to try it, but for him to spend to buy a device and liquid, it will be like he's buying a carton of cigarette. And most of users, they will not spend that much money at the beginning to get into something new. They will like to try it when they see, okay, it's affordable, something, let me see if it's good. That's why I believe disposable in the long term, it's more expensive, but to the beginner, it's cheaper than they start with kit because they don't know how they start.
Right.
That's what my belief. And that's what we see the market is. Because if you want to buy a device, you have to spend money on the device, spend money on the batteries, you have to get a charger, you have to buy an e-liquid, and you have to get the coils every time. But for a beginner, he buy a disposable one time, he try it, he like it, it will help him to get off his cigarette, then he can move forward. That's what I see that the market, why it's growing disposable faster.
Okay. And Coco, obviously, you know, most of these devices, as we know, are developed and manufactured in China. And I know you work very closely with the Chinese Association, ECCC. But are you seeing the companies coming together maybe in China and looking at how they use maybe new materials that are maybe biodegradable, that can compost down, or that are made from recycled plastic? Are you seeing those discussions being had at this stage in China?
100%. Actually, we do have a association in China, and Alpha is the main partner of it. So the Chinese factories, the Chinese brands, I see a lot of brands come from China. We actually band together. We want to have a, like what I said, it's a recycle plan. We want to make new materials, new discoveries, innovations to solve the problem of the environmental, and also to do more of the recycle.
Yeah, because I think we've even seen, like at the show here and the show that we just had in the UK, we've even seen products now that are being made of cardboard outers. We saw some plastic that is actually compostable. It degrades over a matter of 8 to 10 weeks if it's put in the soil. So I think the industry, is starting to realize that, you know, in its current form, if we are selling millions of these devices every week around the world, you know, we have to look at ways of recycling the batteries or reusing the batteries. And I think even we've started to see kind of what I would call a hybrid pod system, where the battery is removable and you can reuse it a number of times, and then you just have the biodegradable pod that you take out and use. So I think, you know, these innovations, I think, are going to help the situation. But the other thing as well, and again, we talked a little bit about it at the other sessions, is many people say that, you know, the disposable devices are only kind of designed to attract young people into vaping. You know, from your experience in the retail sector, how do you tackle that situation? Do you see that happening here?
Yes, of course. It's a case of, you know, being very aware. One thing that we really focus here at My Vapery is training and education of our staff. Okay, there are strict rules that we set our staffs when it comes to underage vapors. If you suspect that the individual that's coming to purchase is of underage, ensuring that you check the required identification. Beyond that, as a retailer, is pretty much as we can do. You know, if someone else is purchasing the product on behalf of a minor, you know, it's really something that's out of our hands. But we do our due diligence and do our best and train our staff to ensure that they're following all the regulations. And if they're seen not to be following the regulations, we obviously have to monitor that and deal with that situation accordingly. So yes, this is something that we're constantly looking at, training our staff and getting our staff to also understand what is the impact, how does that affect us as an industry, and how it will affect us and how we will be seen, and how that will affect us in the long term as well with regards to business and being operational.
Absolutely. And is there a minimum age to purchase disposable devices or vaping devices here in the UAE?
Yes, there is, yeah.
And what is that?
It's 18.
18,
yes.
Okay. That's interesting. Now, I know one of the things that we talked about a little over the last couple of days was around compliance. And we've talked a little bit about, and I know you and I have had discussions about,
Yes.
You know, perhaps forming an association and kind of raising standards here amongst manufacturers and retailers. What do you feel would be the benefits of doing that? Do you think that would be a big help here in the UAE?
I think it'll really be a huge benefit putting a union together because us in the industry, we're really looking to change the image that has been associated with the vaping world for such a long time. You know, it's the general, when you're thinking about a vapor, if anyone was to imagine a vapor, they're thinking of a certain type of profile of customer. I think we all know what type of customer we're thinking. Maybe hipster type looking person, you know, with tattoos, spends time in a barber shop. You know, that's really not the case anymore. And that industry has really, really evolved, and we've become a legitimate, viable alternative, you know, to smoking. So for us, we're completely on board with that, and we really want to change the image and the face of the vaping world and how people see us.
Absolutely, and I think the show, you know, this year's show, even compared to last year,
Yes.
there's a huge difference between the quality of the exhibitors here, the types of products that are being exhibited, but also the way that the booths are laid out. I think this gives them a far more business-like appeal, but it's far more professional appeal as well, which I think is you know what this area really needs, and hopefully it will encourage the other jurisdictions around to take the lead, you know, that Dubai has shown here. Do we have any questions from the audience that they would like to ask? We want to try and make this as interactive as possible. Anybody?
There's a question over there.
Oh, the gentleman here.
Hello. Hi, my name is Nathan. I'm a distributor and retailer in Indonesia. I'm curious about what Mr. Atif Amin said just now about partnering with BAT to collect the disposables.
Yes.
I'm curious about what actually happens to the used products after they are being collected, and if there is any proper mechanics to dispose them that is sustainable from the environmental perspective. And who do you think is responsible to actually perform this responsibility? Is it the brand? Is it the retailer? Is it the distributor? That yeah, I would like to know your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just so we've got complete clarity, so there's actually two aspects of our recycling department, okay? One of the things that we have and we facilitate is recycling bins from British American Tobacco VUS, okay? The way that system works is we have recycling bins specifically for VUS products, and the VUS, without advertising them too much, the whole product, including the box, is completely recyclable. So that once the recycling bin is full, it's collected by British American Tobacco, and they dispose of it and recycle it accordingly. But what we have also done as well, also for all the other remaining products, we have our own system. So if people place their disposables in the recycling bins, we've just created our system ourselves where we dispose of as much of the products as we can to dedicated and specialist waste disposable companies. Okay, but when it comes to responsibility, I think responsibility should be taken care by everyone, because initially it's always going to start with the innovator and the manufacturer of the product. The easier the manufacturer makes the product recyclable, the easier it's going to be us as an end user to recycle the product. Obviously, us as a retailer, we're going out of our way because it's something that we care about, the long-term effect on how it's going to affect us, and something that we're very cautious of. Sorry, that's bad timing. But yeah, so to answer your question, I think we should all take responsibility, but it all starts from really the manufacturer.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that as well, because you know we deal a lot with this in the UK. We're a very environmentally aware country, but the biggest problem that we're finding is the fact that you know the products are different in design, in features. They can be difficult to take apart, and this is where the added cost comes in. So the biggest challenge we're finding is that it almost costs us more to dispose of the product than it does to make the product. So I think I kind of agree with you. It all comes down to the design of the product itself. And this is where getting all of the manufacturers, I think, involved in the discussion around how do we dismantle the products? Can we reuse the batteries specifically? And one of the things that we're even looking at doing with the UK, and we're talking to Elfbar and many other manufacturers, is can the products be dismantled and perhaps the raw materials shipped back to China to be reused? So these are the various different things that we're looking at, but also looking at the materials, perhaps the plastic materials that are being used. I know hemp now is a great material that you can make a plastic-like material from. So it's looking at all of these different options and how we can, as an industry, to work together to do it, because it can't be done by a single retailer. It can't be done by a single brand on their own, because even if you have a national recycling program, who's going to pay for that? Is it the government? Probably not. If it's the manufacturers, well, how do you proportion that? Some manufacturers are very big, some manufacturers are very low. So these are all of the challenges that we've faced in the UK when we've looked at the problem, and I'm sure the UAE is no different. But I think what's important, and this is one of the reasons we're doing this talk, is we have to start talking about it, because if we don't, the regulators certainly will. Do we have any other questions? This gentleman here.
Hi, Chris Kendall here from Vaping 360. Slightly controversial question, perhaps. Why is there a need for disposables at all? We have some fantastic pre-filled products, pod systems. Shouldn't we be pushing people to those pre-filled pod systems instead of disposables if there is so much of a concern on the environmental side? I guess my question is why this sudden push towards disposables. I think we have a lot of stands here and companies now offering, we started with 1,000 puffs, it's now 10,000 puffs plus. Why has there been this rise for disposables? Is it so much easier for a smoker to pick up a disposable over a pre-filled pod system?
Who wants to handle that one, anybody?
Yeah, I can reply. There is a difference between disposable and pod system. When you are a beginner, we saying is first he think about the money. When he's buying a particular brand of pod system that he have to keep his battery and keep buying his refills, he must love that brand, like that flavor for him to start with it. I agree with you that disposable going out of bloom from 1,000 buff to 10,000 buff, that's not reasonable at all. It should be at max, what my belief is 3,000 buff, that the most. It doesn't need to be rechargeable, make it with a huge amount. If you want to go that big, then you're right, you get closed pod system or you go to open tank. That's why the market need to go all together. We're only growing the market in a way that today there is this company make 1,000, the other company 1,500. We challenging each other. If you look into the show, you see a lot of molds look like. You see 90% of the industry flavors, same flavors. Okay, you want to pick and choose. If you have, let's say, 10 brands with 1,000 buffs, those 10 brands have the same flavors on the shelves. They only compete with each other on pricing. They similar looking, sadly. There is nothing new in it. There is no futures added to it. That's why closed pod system is good, but still for beginner, disposable help them more. But the numbers of buffs, you're right, it's going out of bloom. I agree. We should stop at a point.
Thank you, Omar.
I don't mind adding to this as well also, because if you're looking at it from a convenience perspective, and what are we competing with? We're competing with cigarettes, right? Okay, so if I'm going through the process of a cigarette, I'm opening a box, pulling out a cigarette and lighting, done, right? So essentially this is one thing that we have to tackle. This is one thing where the disposable has come into play. So from a convenience perspective, as much as we know there's a huge environmental impact, and this is something that we take very seriously at My Vapory. We are very big on educating when a customer comes in. If we see them on multiple occasions, we know we would go through a full diagnostics of what their usage is, why they're using it. Once we see them repeatedly, we can then start advising them, okay, great, you've now quit smoking, congratulations. Okay, did you know there's such thing as a pre-filled pod system? So once we've got them that gateway off and what would be great for us really would be new innovative products that are as easy to use as a disposable. Because right now we're really competing with a cigarette, which is literally just click and go.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I've been in the industry for an awful long time. In fact, when I started in the UK, there was only 2 Cigalike brands. There was no open system. So I've seen every innovation from there. So disposables, as I said, aren't new. They've always been that low-cost entry, and then as people gain more confidence, they move to something else. I think what's changed now is the fact that the market in the US kind of grew this new market. Obviously it was a loophole that allowed them to be sold without PMTA. So for manufacturers, they're here to make money, right? They're here to grow their business. So when they see their number one market doing that, they go, well, will these products sell in other markets? And ultimately, the markets themselves will decide whether they survive or not. In my opinion, we're oversaturated with the amount of disposables on the market, period. I don't think that they will be sustainable at the current levels in the long term. I think 8 to 12 months we'll see many of them go away. But what you will end up is you'll probably end up with 8 to 10 key brands around the world. And that will be the entry point. But consumers do move around. No single item is right for everybody. And I think that's why it is important to have a disposable. It is important to have a pod system. And it is important to have various different levels of open tank system. Because the consumer will find their own way. They may try a pod system and go, ooh, I paid 20 quid for that or whatever it is. Here, I'm not sure the pricing. But that's expensive for a lot of people. And even in the UK, we're finding that the government is now looking at how do we make these products cheaper for people to try, for those people who are on a lower income. And I think the disposable really does solve that problem. They are a cheap entry point, but they're very expensive to use if you're a regular vapor. So I think people quickly realize that. And I think even in the UK, when they first arrived in their current form, we found a lot of young people trying them. That's concerning in its own right. But now we're starting to see an older generation trying them, but not staying on them for very long. They're switching to something else very quickly. So I think it's just one of those new reiterations of our marketplace, and that will always happen as this industry develops. That's my thought. Coco, anything from Elfbar's perspective?
Yeah, because Elfbar has lots of disposables, and I believe the answer comes from the users, because there are different kinds of product in the market. We have disposables, pod system, pre-fill pod, and the refill pod. So why people need disposable? Because the beginners, they find the pre-fill pod and the pod system are difficult to use. The battery is expensive. So disposables are easy to use and it's quite cheap. So the beginners, they want to quit smoking, so they find disposable is more easy to carry. Also, we have the large products. They are rechargeable. So I believe the main answer comes from the first answer is recycle, is environmental issues. If we find a new material to solve these problems, there won't be many problems at all. So that's what is Elfbar's doing. And I believe the other brands are also trying to find the answers.
Thank you very much.
Another question over here.
Hello, my name is Sergey. I'm from Kazakhstan. Now, vaping and disposable pods is very popular in our country. Before that moment, just because our government make new beautiful law to ban whole vaping in our country, and this is very sad. And maybe you have some advices for our government, just because we trying to resist these new laws, and it's very sad. Thank you.
Yeah, this is, I work with governments all over the world looking at vaping, and it is a challenge. Unfortunately, you have negative news coming out from the World Health Organization. So countries that align themselves very closely to the World Health Organization are looking at prohibitionist standpoints on this. Whereas you've got countries like the UK, like New Zealand, for instance, that understand that vaping has its place. It is far less harmful than smoking. Nicotine, yes, is addictive, but nicotine doesn't kill anybody. Smoking does, and I think that's the huge difference. But I think also you'll find in countries perhaps where they're very reliant on tobacco money, they're very, where countries perhaps where the government is directly involved in the production of cigarettes and the sale of cigarettes, you're going to find that those countries are going to be very negative on vaping because it costs them money. Because one of the problems is, if vaping is such a good thing, you don't want a situation where you're making it more expensive or just as expensive as smoking. Because what we find, and the retailers will tell you, that the main reason for people switching from smoking to vaping is because it's much cheaper to do. Most countries, it's very expensive to smoke. But that's probably the number one reason. The second reason is because it's far healthier for you. But if consumers are getting the wrong message, and I believe your government is sending smokers and consumers the wrong message by what they're doing, that's only going to cost people's lives. And what we find even in the US, where states have banned flavors, where they've put some prohibition into place, that all that does is turn people back to smoking. It doesn't make them quit. It just makes them smokers again. And unfortunately, in some jurisdictions, I think that's what the end game is. That's what they want to do. And a good example of that, in my mind, is California, California and New York. They profit from the master settlement agreement in the US. They make huge money from that. But as smoking declined, their payments from the master settlement declined. So what did they do? Oh, let's ban flavors. Let's make it more difficult for vaping, because they need the smoking numbers to go back up. Do we have any other questions? Oh. Anybody? No? Well, I think also the other thing that I notice about this show compared to last year is the imagery that people are using. The packaging seems to be more adult orientated than it perhaps was last year. As retailers and manufacturers, is that something that you are conscious of when it comes to your branding? Is that what you think you look at?
Like, sorry, I didn't get what you're saying.
Oh, sorry. So what I noticed from the branding that we're seeing this year,
Yes.
it seems to be far more aimed at adults.
Yes.
And not so much at like cartoon characters and crazy things like that.
Because we believe that we should focus always on adult smokers, that people smoking cigarette, get them to quit cigarette. We don't need anyone who is not smoking to get into the vape. We don't need youngest people that they never tried smoking, and because vape have flavor, they should try it. No, we try to make it look that more adult, more serious product. As you see here in UAE, the government made 50% of their package, it's a warning with the health, and you must have all that what should say it's harmful, and the right warning and the age, you must have it. And back in the days, they used to use more colorful on the package, It used to be because that the fashion at that time, I believe. Now the companies now realize, okay, if I have a good quality, my package look legit, nice, it's going to sell. Doesn't matter if I'm attractive on how I look. More focus on the quality of the device, the good as a pure flavor, the good of passing as long as possible.
Absolutely, I think that's great advice. And from a retailer's perspective, you know, how important is the image of the products that you stock? Because you want to stock many different products, right? So how do you make a decision on what you stock and don't stock?
Yes, and that's something that we do look at in depth. We look at, you know, the products that are coming on board. Do they follow a certain level of ethics? As I mentioned, some of the brands that we work with do adhere to that. So ensuring that the packaging is not appealing to the miners, ensuring that they're following good ethics, good practice when it comes to recycling. So yes, we do our due diligence, ensuring that any brand that we bring on board, because any brand that we bring on board, that imagery will be in our stores. So it's something that we look at in depth and ensure that we're following the right guidelines, ensuring that we're not attracting the wrong type of customer or attracting the miners.
Absolutely. And Coco, you know, you're involved in the marketing of Elf Bar. They seem to have gone with a very plain type of packaging. Was that a conscious decision?
Okay, so as a brand is another kind of issue. So I have a different point of view actually. So vape products are now is not only the products we are thinking of. They are some kind of like fashion, some kind of things that the adult like, young people like, but not the teenagers. So Alpha has many different colors of products, and we have different kind of designs. These designs and colors are for our end customers, but not the teenagers. So we have like the teenager band. We follow the teenager bands. We follow different legal connotations in different countries. So that's why we have the signs on the package. We have the signs on our social media pictures, and also we have the signs. We track our distributors. We want them to check the IDs of their customers to make sure they didn't sell their products to teenagers. So that's what the brand do.
That makes perfect sense. Do we have any other questions from the audience? One more here.
Yes. Actually, I have a question for Coco, if you don't mind. Do you agree with point of view of Mr. Omar that smokers in the beginning, they need to use disposable, and in the future, they will have to transition to closed pod system? Do you agree with that? Or do you see a future where Elf Bar users forever they will be using disposables?
It depends on different kind of people. You know, for me, I'll try different kinds of vape products, but most of the beginners, they will use disposable because they're cheap, easy to carry, and also they have different kinds of flavors. So that's why we do have like end customers research. Our customers will try disposable because they heard about our brand. They had their recommendations from their friends. So that's why it's easy to try for disposables. So actually it depends on different kind of people. People will try disposables at the first time, and sometimes they will try refill pod, pre-fill pod. It depends on how much they want to spend and what kind of product they want, and also which flavor they desire.
And I think I'll just add to that as well. I think, it's not a case of whether a consumer stays with one product indefinitely. What we find is a consumer will stay with a product that they feel comfortable with, whether that's a disposable, a pod system, or whatever. But also they transition from one to another, or they may use two types of devices. So I know many users that have a larger open tank system, but that's an expensive piece of kit. So when they go to a nightclub or when they go out, it's just easy to throw a couple of disposables in their pocket. If they lose them, they lose them, or maybe they give it to a friend when they're out. So it's much more of a fun thing, I think, for a lot of people. And I've even seen that with people that hate disposables, and now I see them using them when they're out. So I think it's just a consumer will find the product that they like the most, and that's whether it's heat not burn, or whether it's a lozenge, or whether it's a vaping device. The consumer will find where they're comfortable.
And also, we sometimes have customers, they firstly use mod, the big ones, sir. And they try to use disposables and the pods, and they find they like these ones. They don't use the mod as well,
Yeah, because I think the other thing that we're starting to see develop as well, and I think Elf Bar does it, right? You've got your disposable, but now you've got a new pod system with the same liquids. So I think it helps that if a consumer likes that liquid, then they'll stay within the brand family. So you have to offer them different products, right?
Yeah, and the Alpha also have liquid. Our liquid share on the May in UK, so that's why we have different kind of product. We want to share our liquid and also our vape systems.
Just a follow-up question to the retailer, maybe. Do you see this as a temporary trend that people are taking up disposables? Perhaps reversing the transition. Maybe before they were using open tanks and juice or closed pod system, and now they are using disposables. Do you see that happening a lot in your markets, and whether you see this as a temporary trend?
Right now, the way I see things, based on the convenience, disposables will be here from a consumer perspective. But when it comes to legislation and what's allowed legally, if that changes, that's where I think there could be a potential change. Right now, disposables are legal. How long that will last, we don't know, okay? Because there is a huge environmental impact with disposables. So based on consumer usage, as John mentioned, they're very easy to use. And currently there's a huge demand for disposables because of that. So do I see it continuing? I'd say yes.
Yeah, I think the other factor you're going to look at as well, and this goes back to my earlier comment about the imagery that we see here. I think if disposables become popular, which they have, if the industry doesn't control that, if they don't control the youth access to those products, and this is where I talked about the marketing and the youth appeal. If the industry doesn't control that, I can see disposables being banned in countries purely because of that risk. And I've seen in the UK, although the numbers are very low for youth uptake, we get calls from schools every week about young people vaping. So we're doing an awful lot of things in the background to combat that. But it is going to come up on political radars as it becomes more popular. So I want the industry to start taking that seriously, because if they don't, the politicians will.
Yes.
This young lady here.
Hello, my name is Mary. I have a question regarding regulation. So I read an article that says that UK government has equaled disposables to medicine, like prescription, in order to overcome nicotine addiction. What do you think about it? And if so, if it happens in the United Kingdom, how the retail process go? Is disposables are being retailed in pharmacies, or is it happens like everywhere, like vape shops, etc.? Thank you.
No problem. It's a very good question, and I think there's a lot of confusion around this whole medical licensing. It's not an easy process. It's a very difficult process. And it's not a new process. Companies have been allowed to do it for many years. But even in the UK, only one company has successfully gone through the process to date. And that product eventually was not brought to market because it wasn't commercially viable. I think disposables have their place, and we talked about convenience, and I think for me, disposables and pod systems are perfect for a convenience sector. But with the medical licensing in the UK, you have to have a specially designed device. It can't be just, oh, well, we'll take an ELF bar and we'll put it into a pharmacy. That's not how it works. Because it has to have the exact dosage every single time. It has to go through a very stringent regulatory process. That can take up to 5 years. And this is one of the challenges that we face as an industry with doing that route, is that the technology is moving so fast that a device you start with in the start of the process is out of date within a short period. The other big issue is that the whole medical route, although it sounds good, smokers aren't sick. They don't need a medicine. What they need is good quality devices that are tested, that we know what the ingredients are. That's what they need, and they need it available wherever cigarettes are sold. Because a consumer, and we've seen this with our industry, this industry didn't start from huge big companies. It started from entrepreneurs making a product, and one consumer talking to another consumer going, hey, I found this e-cigarette, it's great, have you tried it? That's how this industry has grown. And obviously now you have some very big companies and big marketing budgets, but that's not how this industry develops. So I think, although it sounds good, and it may happen, I know there's several companies looking at it, it is an unknown market for those companies. But the reason the UK government is doing that is for two reasons. One is to make the products more affordable to people who can't afford them, but also to give the medical community a little bit of reassurance. Because the trouble we have is we have lots of doctors who understand vaping and get it, and we heard from a couple of them yesterday. But there's an awful lot of doctors out there that go, oof, we don't know about these products. Are they really better? And they're cautious about prescribing them. So the feeling with the UK is that if it was a medically licensed product, that yeah, those doctors might be more encouraged to do it. But it's going to be a long-term process.
Thank you so much.
I think we've got 1 or 2 minutes left if we've got any more questions. No? Okay, well, I think that's a wrap. I'd like to thank my panelists, but most of all, thank you to the audience for really good questions coming out of this session. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.